sharp crack of the slap echoed like a gunshot, instantly silencing the crowded underground lounge. Hardened criminals held their breath, waiting for the trembling woman to be executed. Instead, the ruthless syndicate boss traced his reddened cheek, looked into her defiant eyes, and did the unthinkable. He smiled. The air inside the Cobalt Lounge was thick with the scent of imported cigars, expensive bourbon, and the invisible, suffocating weight of dangerous men. Located beneath the bustling streets of Chicago's South Side, it was a place that did not exist on any city map. For Charlie Reyes, a 26-year-old auditor drowning in her younger sister's medical debts, it was supposed to be a one-night gig. Her roommate, a career bartender, had fallen ill, and Charlie had desperately taken the shift to keep the eviction notices at bay. She wore a crisp black uniform that felt entirely too tight, navigating the dimly lit room with a silver tray of drinks. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact, precisely as she had been instructed. "Don't look at them, Charlie. Serve the drinks, take the tips, and pretend you're deaf," her roommate had warned. But staying invisible was entirely impossible when Frankie Lombardi, a mid-level enforcer with a penchant for cheap thrills and too much whiskey, decided she was the evening's entertainment. "Come here, sweetheart," Frankie slurred, his heavy ring-clad hand snapping out to wrap around Charlie's wrist as she tried to walk past his booth. Charlie froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Please, sir, let go. I have other tables to serve." "They can wait," Frankie sneered, yanking her closer. The silver tray tipped, sending a glass of iced amber liquid crashing onto the velvet upholstery. Frankie's face instantly twisted into an ugly snarl. "Look what you did, you stupid little—" Before Frankie could raise a hand to her, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound, but rather the absolute cessation of it. The low murmur of conversations died. The clinking of glasses stopped. The piano player abruptly pulled his hands from the keys. Standing at the head of the VIP section was DeAndre Patel. DeAndre was a ghost story whispered among the Chicago elite and the criminal underworld alike. At 34, he had systematically dismantled the city's rival factions, building an empire on cold logic and ruthless execution. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair flawlessly swept back, his sharp jawline set in stone. He did not yell. He did not have to. His mere presence commanded absolute, terrifying obedience. DeAndre walked toward the commotion, the crowd parting for him like water. He hated noise. He hated messes. And most of all, he hated undisciplined men causing scenes in his establishments. "Frankie," DeAndre said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that somehow carried across the silent room. "Let the girl go." Frankie paled, instantly dropping Charlie's wrist as if it had caught fire. "Boss, she spilled the drink. I was just teaching her some respect." Charlie was hyperventilating, the adrenaline roaring in her ears. She stumbled backward, her vision tunneling. She felt a large, firm hand grip her shoulder, DeAndre simply stepping in to move her out of the way so he could deal with his subordinate. But Charlie's mind, fractured by panic and years of taking abuse from a cruel world, completely snapped. She didn't register that the man touching her was the one who had just saved her. She only registered another man putting his hands on her. Operating purely on blind, terrified instinct, Charlie spun around. She raised her right hand and brought it across DeAndre Patel's face with every ounce of strength in her body. Smack. The sound was apocalyptic. Time stopped. Frankie gasped, taking a step back, crossing himself instinctively. Half a dozen heavily armed men in the shadows instantly drew their weapons, the metallic clacks of safeties being clicked off echoing in the dead silence. Charlie stood there, her chest heaving, her hand stinging with a fierce, hot pain. As her vision cleared, she looked up and realized exactly who she had just struck. DeAndre Patel's head was turned slightly to the side from the force of the blow. A stark red handprint was blooming against the pale olive skin of his left cheek. Charlie stopped breathing. She waited for the bullet. She waited for him to give the nod that would end her life and leave her sister utterly alone. Slowly, agonizingly, DeAndre turned his face back to her. His dark, piercing eyes locked onto hers. He reached up, his long, scarred fingers lightly tracing the burning skin of his cheek. For 10 excruciating seconds, he simply stared at her, analyzing the sheer terror yet undeniable defiance blazing in her hazel eyes. Then the corners of DeAndre Patel's mouth twitched. The twitch grew, stretching into a genuine, chillingly handsome smile. "Put them away," DeAndre ordered quietly, not breaking eye contact with Charlie. The guns in the shadows were lowered immediately. DeAndre took a single step closer to Charlie. He was a foot taller than her, smelling of expensive bergamot and danger. He leaned in, his lips hovering just inches from her ear. "You have exactly 10 seconds to run out the back door, little bird, before I change my mind." Charlie didn't need to be told twice. She turned and fled, bursting through the kitchen doors and sprinting out into the freezing rain-slicked alleys of Chicago, leaving her coat, her tips, and her sanity behind. Back in the lounge, DeAndre stood in the center of the room. He wiped a drop of blood from his split lip with his thumb, looking at it with a dark, fascinated amusement. Nobody had dared to touch him in over a decade. In a world full of sycophants and cowards, this desperate girl had just shown him something entirely real. "Boss," Frankie whimpered, dropping to his knees. "I swear to God, I didn't know." "Frankie," DeAndre interrupted, his smile vanishing, replaced by the frigid cruelty that had made him king. "You have exhausted my patience." For 3 days, Charlie lived in a state of suffocating paranoia. Every time a car idled outside her apartment building, she flinched. Every time the phone rang, her heart stopped. But by the 4th morning, when she walked into her dreary cubicle at Pendleton Logistics, the paralyzing fear began to give way to a cautious, desperate hope. Maybe DeAndre Patel had bigger things to worry about than a substitute waitress. Charlie was a senior auditor at Pendleton, a mid-sized freight forwarding company that handled shipping across the Midwest. It was a boring, mind-numbing job, but it provided the health insurance her sister Emily desperately needed. That afternoon, her boss, Arthur Pendleton, dropped a heavy stack of ledgers onto her desk. He was a nervous, sweating man who always looked like he was one loud noise away from a heart attack. "I need you to rush these through, Charlie," Arthur stammered, avoiding her eyes. "Approve the offshore transfers for the steel shipments. Don't look too closely at the gross margins, just push them through by 5. Charlie frowned, opening the top ledger. She had noticed discrepancies in these accounts for months. Massive sums of money were being moved for phantom freight that never actually hit the docks. "Mr. Pendleton, these numbers don't add up. The tax liabilities alone are completely miscalculated. If the IRS audits us—" "Just do it, Charlie," Arthur snapped, his voice cracking with genuine panic. "Or you won't have a job tomorrow, do you understand?" He stormed off, leaving Charlie staring at the numbers. As an auditor, her brain recognized patterns. She began running the account, routing numbers through the system, a sinking feeling forming in her gut. The shell companies receiving the money were heavily disguised, but a quick dig through the public registries revealed a recurring corporate officer, L. Moretti, Laith Moretti. Even Charlie, who tried to stay entirely disconnected from the city's dark underbelly, knew that name. Laith Moretti was the ruthless, volatile boss of the Northside faction, and DeAndre Patel's most hated rival. Pendleton Logistics wasn't a struggling freight company. It was a massive money laundering front for the Moretti crime family. At 6 p.m, Charlie packed her bag, her hands shaking. She needed to quit. She needed to take Emily and leave Chicago entirely. She walked out of the office building into the torrential downpour, clutching her umbrella like a shield. She hurried down the slick pavement toward the L train station, her head down. Suddenly, a sleek black town car pulled up directly onto the curb, blocking her path. Charlie froze. The back door swung open, and the rain seemed to instantly mute itself. Sitting in the plush leather interior nursing a glass of scotch was DeAndre Patel. The red mark on his cheek had faded to a faint yellow bruise, but his eyes were just as predatory as she remembered. "Get in, Charlie," he said calmly. "How do you know my name?" she whispered, the umbrella trembling in her grip. "I know everything about you," DeAndre replied, taking a slow sip of his drink. "I know your sister is at St. Jude's waiting for a kidney transplant. I know you're 2 months behind on rent. And I know that right now, you're carrying a flash drive in your purse that contains $30 million worth of Laith Moretti's dirty secrets." Charlie's blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about." DeAndre sighed softly, a master of patience. "Arthur Pendleton is a dead man walking. Laith Moretti is already cleaning house. If you get on that train, Laith's men will be waiting at your stop. They know you looked at the ledgers today. You are a loose end." "Why are you telling me this?" Charlie cried out over the rain. "Because, little bird," DeAndre said, leaning forward into the light, "when you slapped me at the Cobalt, you set off a chain reaction. Word travels fast in this city. Laith heard that a waitress humiliated me and walked out alive. He thinks you're either a rival operative or someone I care about. Either way, he's coming for you." Charlie felt her knees buckle. She was trapped in a war she didn't even know existed. "What do you want from me?" "Get in the car," DeAndre commanded softly. Having no other choice, Charlie collapsed the umbrella and slid into the back seat. The door slammed shut, plunging them into luxurious, heavily tinted silence. The car instantly accelerated into the traffic. DeAndre poured a second glass of scotch and handed it to her. She took it with shaking hands. "Here is the reality of your situation, Charlie," DeAndre said, his voice a hypnotic rhythm. "Laith will kill you and your sister just to spite me. I, however, am willing to offer you a very generous employment package." Charlie stared at him. "Employment? You are a brilliant auditor. You figured out Laith's entire laundering network in 3 hours on a Tuesday afternoon. Arthur Pendleton couldn't do that in 3 years." DeAndre stated, genuine respect flickering in his dark eyes. "I want to dismantle Laith Moretti entirely. I need a forensic accountant who can trace his money and bleed him dry from the inside out. And if I refuse, then I will let you out at the next corner and wish you the best of luck with Laith's hitmen," DeAndre said plainly, devoid of malice. It was just a brutal fact. Charlie looked at the terrifying man beside her. He was a monster, a killer, a syndicate boss. But he was also the only man offering her a shield. "If I do this," Charlie said, her voice shaking but her chin lifting in that same defiance that had gotten her into this mess. "You pay for Emily's medical bills, all of them, in full." DeAndre's lips curved into that same terrifying, fascinating smile he had worn in the lounge. He reached out, his warm fingers brushing a wet strand of hair away from her cheek, sending a dangerous, electric thrill down her spine. "Deal," DeAndre murmured. "Welcome to the family, Charlie." For the next 6 weeks, Charlie Reyes ceased to exist in the real world. She traded her dreary cubicle at Pendleton Logistics for a sprawling, high-security penthouse suite overlooking the glittering skyline of downtown Chicago. The doors were heavily armored, the elevators required biometric scans, and the perimeter was guarded by men who spoke little but watched everything. Yet, despite the invisible cage, Charlie had never felt more powerful. Her new office was a state-of-the-art command center. 3 massive curved monitors glowed continuously with cascading spreadsheets, encrypted banking portals, and the financial lifeblood of the Moretti crime family. DeAndre had given her unlimited resources and a terrifyingly simple directive: bleed him dry, and Charlie did exactly that. Applying her brilliant analytical mind to the dark web of underworld finance, she became a digital phantom. She systematically dismantled Laith Moretti's money laundering operations. She found the dummy corporations registered in the Cayman Islands and rerouted their liquid assets into untraceable cryptocurrency wallets, controlled by DeAndre. She triggered automated IRS red flags on Moretti's legitimate front businesses, freezing their operational capital. She turned Laith's entire financial infrastructure into a catastrophic maze of dead ends and locked vaults. It was a dangerous, exhilarating game of chess, and with every $1 million she siphoned away from the Northside faction, DeAndre Patel's fascination with her deepened. He was a constant, brooding presence in the penthouse. DeAndre rarely slept, preferring to stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass of bourbon, watching the city he was ruthlessly conquering. But more often than not, Charlie caught him watching her. The dynamic between them had shifted from captor and captive to a thrilling, volatile partnership. He was the sword, and she was the silent poison. Late one night, rain lashing against the reinforced glass of the penthouse, Charlie sat rubbing her tired eyes, staring at a frozen transfer screen. The quiet hum of the servers was the only sound until the soft tread of DeAndre's expensive leather shoes approached her desk. He set a steaming cup of dark roast coffee beside her keyboard. "You've been staring at that routing sequence for 4 hours, Charlie. Even weapons of mass destruction need to rest." Charlie leaned back in her ergonomic chair, sighing. "Lath is getting desperate. He tried to move 8 million through a shell casino in Macau tonight. I blocked the authorization protocols and trapped the funds in a holding account, but he's bringing in heavy-hitter hackers to trace the block. I can keep them out, but it's getting chaotic." DeAndre stepped behind her chair. His large, warm hands settled onto her tense shoulders. Charlie's breath caught in her throat. She should have pulled away, but the intoxicating mix of exhaustion and the dark, magnetic pull he exerted over her kept her glued to the spot. His thumbs began to knead the tight muscles at the base of her neck with practiced, firm pressure. "Let him panic," DeAndre murmured, his deep voice vibrating right by her ear. "A desperate man makes fatal mistakes. You have crippled a kingpin with nothing but a keyboard and a brilliant mind. You are magnificent, little bird." The praise sent a hot, dangerous thrill straight to her core. Charlie tilted her head back slightly, looking at him upside down. "You paid Emily's hospital bills today. The surgeon called me. She's moved to the top of the transplant list and all the post-op care is fully funded." "I'm a man of my word," DeAndre replied, his eyes dark and unreadable as he stared down at her. "Your sister will live a long, healthy life, and she will never know that it was funded by the collapse of the Moretti Empire." "Thank you," Charlie whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that this ruthless, violent man was the only person who had ever truly taken care of her. DeAndre stopped massaging her shoulders. He leaned over, caging her against the desk by placing his hands on the armrests of her chair. His face was inches from hers, his gaze dropping to her lips before meeting her hazel eyes. The air between them crackled with thick, unspoken electricity. "I didn't do it just for a business transaction, Charlie," he said softly, the lethal edge in his voice entirely gone, replaced by a raw, possessive hunger. "I protect what is mine." Before Charlie could process the weight of that statement, an ear-piercing alarm shattered the quiet intimacy of the room. The monitors flashed a violent, blinding red. Charlie spun around, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The romantic tension evaporated, instantly replaced by the ice-cold grip of adrenaline. Lines of code cascaded down the center screen as she desperately tried to trace the source of the breach. "What is it?" DeAndre demanded, his posture instantly shifting from a lingering lover to a general at war. "It's not a financial hack," Charlie said, her voice rising in panic. "It's a localized ping. They aren't trying to get their money back. They were tracing the IP footprint of my defensive algorithms. They used a Trojan horse in the Macau transfer to bypass the VPN." DeAndre's jaw tightened. "Did they find this building?" "No," Charlie gasped, her face draining of all color as she stared at the flashing coordinates on the screen. "They traced the secondary IP, the one I used yesterday to log into the hospital's patient portal to check on Emily." The silence that followed was heavier than a collapsed star. "Lath knows about St. Jude's," Charlie whispered, sheer terror seizing her heart. "He knows about Emily. Get my car, now. Pull every man from the Southside docks and send them to St. Jude's Medical Center. Shoot on sight." DeAndre's voice was a terrifying, glacial calm as he barked orders into his phone, striding toward the penthouse elevator. He was strapping a customized holster over his broad shoulders, checking the magazine of his sidearm with deadly efficiency. Charlie sprinted after him, grabbing her coat. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," DeAndre snapped, turning to face her, his eyes blazing with a protective fury she had never seen before. Lath is sending a hit squad to that hospital to use your sister as leverage. You will stay here behind bulletproof glass." "She is my sister," Charlie screamed, the defiance that had sparked this entire twisted journey flaring back to life. "I am not sitting in a tower while she gets caught in the crossfire. If you leave me here, I will break the security protocols and walk out the front door myself." DeAndre stared at her, his chest heaving. He saw the absolute, immovable resolve in her eyes, the same resolve that had possessed her to slap the most dangerous man in Chicago. He cursed violently in Italian, grabbed her by the waist and pulled her into the elevator. "You stay behind me. You do not leave my sight. If I tell you to drop, you drop. Understood?" Charlie nodded frantically. The ride to St. Jude's was a blur of roaring engines, flashing streetlights, and the metallic clatter of weapons being loaded. DeAndre's black SUV tore through the slick Chicago streets, flanked by 3 other vehicles packed with his most lethal enforcers. When they arrived at the hospital, the night air was completely still. Too still. "They're already inside," DeAndre muttered, stepping out of the vehicle and shielding Charlie with his body. He signaled to his men, who fanned out like shadows, silently infiltrating the side entrances of the massive brick building. Charlie's heart hammered against her ribs as DeAndre led her through the employee loading dock. The backup generators were humming, casting eerie, flickering shadows down the sterile white corridors. Emily's room was on the 4th floor, the intensive care wing. As they pushed through the stairwell doors onto the 4th floor, the smell of cordite and copper hit them. 2 of Lath's men were crumpled on the linoleum floor, already neutralized by DeAndre's advance team. But at the end of the hallway, directly outside Emily's glass-walled room, stood Lath Moretti himself, surrounded by 4 heavily armed guards. Lath was an older man, his face scarred and weather-beaten, his eyes manic with the desperation of a crumbling empire. He had a gun pointed directly through the glass at Emily's sleeping form. "Patel!" Lath's voice echoed down the corridor, harsh and grating. "I knew you'd come. You think you can take my city? You think you can drain my accounts and leave me with nothing?" DeAndre stepped out from behind the corner, pushing Charlie safely behind a heavy structural pillar. He walked slowly, casually, into the center of the hallway, his hands loose at his sides. He didn't even draw his weapon. The sheer arrogance of the gesture made Lath's men nervously adjust their grips on their rifles. "It's already done, Lath," DeAndre said, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Your capos have abandoned you. Your offshore accounts are zeros. Your empire is a ghost. Surrender now, and I'll let you leave Chicago alive." "I'm not leaving," Lath roared, his hand shaking as he aimed the gun at Emily. "I figured it out, DeAndre. I know you didn't hack me. It was her, the little waitress, the auditor. Bring her out, Patel. Give me the girl who destroyed my life, or I blow her sister's head off right now." Behind the pillar, Charlie squeezed her eyes shut, tears spilling over her cheeks. She was about to step out, ready to trade her life for Emily's, when DeAndre's voice rang out, cold and merciless. "You don't get to make demands, Lath. Look out the window," Lath frowned, glancing toward the large window at the end of the ward. Down in the parking lot, bathed in the harsh glare of floodlights, were 36 of DeAndre's men, heavily armed, dragging a battered, terrified man out of a van. It was Lath's only son. Lath's face drained of colour. He staggered back against the wall, the gun lowering slightly. You crossed the line, Patel." "I am the line," DeAndre corrected softly, his eyes dead and unblinking. "Drop the weapon, Lath, or your bloodline ends tonight on the asphalt." The standoff lasted only 3 seconds, but to Charlie it felt like a lifetime. The sound of a heavy pistol hitting the linoleum floor echoed down the hall. Lath Moretti dropped to his knees, utterly defeated. DeAndre didn't hesitate. He raised his hand and his men moved in, sweeping Lath and his guards away, dragging them into the shadows where they would never be heard from again. The hallway fell silent. The immediate threat was gone. Charlie rushed out from behind the pillar, sprinting down the hallway and bursting into the hospital room. Emily was still asleep, sedated and oblivious to the war that had just raged outside her door. Charlie collapsed into the chair beside the bed, burying her face in the blankets, sobbing uncontrollably as the adrenaline finally crashed. A moment later she felt a heavy, warm coat draped over her trembling shoulders, DeAndre stood beside her. The ruthless syndicate boss who had just dismantled a rival empire with terrifying precision was now gently stroking her hair. "She's safe, Charlie," DeAndre murmured softly. "I told you, I protect what is mine." Charlie looked up at him, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the soft glow of the heart monitor. She saw the blood on his cuffs, the coldness in his eyes that he reserved for the rest of the world, and the intense, burning devotion he saved only for her. She had stepped into a world of monsters, only to find that the most dangerous one of all belonged to her. Charlie stood up, closing the distance between them. She reached up, gently placing her hand over the exact spot on his cheek where she had slapped him 6 weeks ago. DeAndre's breath hitched. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a fierce, bruising kiss that tasted of danger, survival, and a twisted, beautiful victory. Charlie kissed him back, anchoring her hands in his dark hair, finally accepting her place at his side. The game was over, the Empire was theirs, and the girl who had slapped the boss was now the Queen of Chicago. What happens when the line between a dangerous game of survival and a twisted romance completely disappears? Charlie is now trapped between two ruthless men, and one wrong move will cost her everything. Will DeAndre's obsession be her salvation, or her absolute ruin? Drop a like if you are hooked, hit that share button to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on the thrilling continuation of this story.